Everybody, and welcome to today's VMware Cloud on AWS Customer Success Architect Team Office Hours call. Joining me so far today, we have my good friend and colleague Prasanna. Thank you for joining, PG. As it stands at the moment, people are just beginning to trickle in, so I'm going to do my customary sort of waffle, say hello to people. Hi Zach, thanks for joining. And what we will do is we'll get started in a moment or two. I know a couple of other people that are scheduled to join. How are you both today? How are you both? Are you keeping well?
Yeah, how are you?
Hey, well, good afternoon.
I'm great, thanks. What I did just realise is that despite the stream that I'm recording, I was on mute with Zoom, so I was just talking at you for ages and thought you were just being rather rude. And then realised it was clearly me. I was at fault. Hey Don, hey Priyanka, thank you for joining. How are you both today? Feel free to unmute, by the way.
Hey, hi, Vila. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. We're a little bit light today on attendees and potentially any sort of demoed content. I did want to bring up a diagram that kind of goes into something I talked about on the last call a little bit, just to explain myself in a little bit more detail, and then maybe we can just cover off some of the other stuff my colleagues are seeing. Hi Patrick, thank you for joining. You can unmute yourself whenever you like if you have any questions. What we tend to do on these calls is we have a quick look at the release notes to see if anything has changed since the last call and maybe dig into some details, and then have a quick dive into the console as well to see if anything has changed. I did notice one thing in the console which was quite interesting, that I was going to ask my colleagues about actually, because I hadn't seen it before. But we'll get into that in a bit. So initially, let's just have a very quick look at the release notes. So the last main update that came out on the April the 24th was for seamless disk resizing with vSphere replication. What's interesting about this is when I first read that, because I skim read lots of things and I don't concentrate enough, I read that as we were using vSphere replication to resize disks, which I thought was completely bonkers. And then I obviously had to reread it and realise it's actually about resizing disks that we've already replicated with vSphere replication. So previously it was a bit of an onerous task to resize disks. You can now quite easily go in and resize the disk. I guess one of the things that you need to be aware of as part of the process of doing this is that vSphere replication clears all of the available multiple points in time. So if you were storing multiple sort of recovery points on there, all of these will be gone after you initiate a disk resize. And I guess that's a reasonably important thing to know if your process or your your documentation or internal processes require multiple failback points, or you keep multiple failback points. Colleagues,
a quick question: are you sharing the screen?
Good shout. See, today is an interesting one, right? First of all, I was talking to you guys on mute, so clearly today is not my best day, people. So to be fair, all I was doing, Prasanna was talking about the release notes, so we're okay in that respect. I wasn't going into a demo or anything, which is good, but thank you for pointing it out. And feel free, anybody else, if you notice that I'm being a bit of an idiot and not sharing or doing something, just let me know.
Yeah, you only have like 10 screens to manage, right? And 10 different softwares to handle, so
yeah. Yeah, there's not many generally. It's so yeah, thanks for that. So literally only one update in the last couple of months. I guess we're focusing on bigger things right now. The M10 or the 1.10 V2 release. Do you guys know off the top of your heads when that's due to come out? I did see a schedule the other day, but I can't remember it. There we go. M10 V2 came out on the 20th. Even better. So I'm not even aware. I'm just skimming through these right now. So that wasn't very good of me, was it? So yeah, the thing to be aware of, I guess, with these upgrades is that despite them being available for new deployments, there's always going to be a bit of a lag on existing deployments. And I think I guess we're probably looking about a month or two right now, aren't we, folks, for if you are already deployed for getting up to the latest release. If you are concerned or you're awaiting features or whatever, feel free to reach out to your either customer success management team, architects, or your general account management team if you're not sure when they're due for release and when you're due for upgrade, should I say. So I guess that's it from a release notes perspective. I've got a question for my colleagues.
Just on that, Will, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
For any customers that are on the call, you will be sent an email to any of the registered users on VMC 7 days before the upgrade is due to happen. So you will be notified of it. So just keep an eye out for the
7
email.
days. Good to know.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ruth. And as I said before, if you deploy fresh, if you're just deploying SDC, you will always get the latest release. So there's no worries there. It's mainly just if you are either waiting for a specific feature to come out, or you want to make sure all your SDCs are on the same release version. So, question for my colleagues. I came across this interesting piece in. Let me just make that a bit bigger. In the network and security tab of our one of our lab SDDCs recently, and I haven't dug into it yet. So I'm just wondering if anybody else has had the time or knows what it is or what it's there for. If you can share, that'd be brilliant.
This is for the transit gateway.
As in the managed.
This is the managed transit gateway by VMware.
Fantastic.
Actually, I was part of the early access with a customer. So yeah, so basically the idea is to interconnect multiple SDDCs using a transit gateway, but this transit gateway will be completely managed by VMware, and it's not a customer owned or customer managed transit gateway, so something to be aware of.
Yep.
Yeah, it basically provides high bandwidth, low latency connectivity between the SDDCs and also VPCs.
So can you then perform any sort of operations between SDDCs then? Would it remove the need, for example, for HCX to migrate between them, or would that still be a requirement?
Yeah, so it basically provides the network connectivity. So we still need a second tool to actually do the heavy lifting or migration, HCX in this case, but it basically removes the need for maybe an IPsec VPN between the SDDCs, or even like some customers use direct connect for routing between the SDDCs. So those kind of maybe suboptimal in some cases connections are not needed anymore if this is generally available.
So if for example a customer is using a direct connect to route between SDDCs, that I would imagine even though the traffic kind of stays within AWS, that they will still encounter egress charges. Do you know if that's going to be the same if they're using the managed transit gateway?
Yeah, so in case of
so.
direct, yeah, because the transit gateway has its own charges, it's charged based on the number of attachments. Yep. And also the number of or amount of data that traverses through it. So I believe the charges still stays the same. So one more point to highlight here is we may not have control over the routes that are learned and advertised, meaning we may not have any controls over which routes to advertise.
So almost exactly the same as we are currently, right? So if you...
Yes.
Yeah,
so
it's like VPN, I assume, where you just advertise all the networks to whatever you connect to.
Interesting. Cool.
Routes are not going to be available on this then?
Sorry, say again? You're a little bit quiet there.
Sorry, static routes are not available?
No, static routes, no. I know, like it's one of the popular asks, with VMC, but even today we don't have a way to configure static routes on the NSX edge.
Yep. The problem is that for us as Cornerstone, we are trying to connect multiple VPCs into SDDC, and we do need something like that to be able to actually route multiple networks into the SDDC.
Ah, right. Well, then you might be interested in this that we talked about last week. Let me just get that diagram up again. So I had a customer use case where we had multiple VPCs that a customer had, and they had a very specific use case where they had, let's call them red and blue networks. So there are many networks in their on-prem environment, and they kind of, in on-prem, they route from, say, a red network goes to a VPC, a native AWS VPC, and then its default route out to the internet is via that native red VPC, and they want to replicate the same sort of thing in VMC on AWS. So the way we managed to set that up was we had segments or subnets within their SDDC. We'll call them blue and red again. And we also set up policy-based VPNs to transit gateway attaches, and then via the transit gateway, their default route was set all the way through that it would be so the red would go out here, go to the transit gateway attach, out to the VPC, and then out to the internet through the internet gateway on that red VPC.
And then the VPN is still involved there, though, right?
It is currently, yeah. So we're not using, obviously there's no sort of managed transit gateway approach here at all. This is VPN to native transit gateway and then out to native VPC.
Which limits you from bandwidth. Your speed is going to be very limited compared to what you have in the back end of 25 gig or 100 gig.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. There is no, as it stands at the moment, this was literally the only way we could do it. So yeah, you are limited. And there's actually a couple of other sort of gotchas or things to be aware of as well, is that when you create a transit gateway attach in AWS and then you hook a VPN onto it, they're expecting 2 VPNs for failover. And obviously we don't support multiple VPNs with the same external IP advertised on it, so configured on it. So we literally, you'll basically get warning messages from AWS if you configure it this way, and you sort of have to ignore them really. But it does function as a mechanism of segregating traffic within the SDDC and then routing it out through individual VPCs to the internet that way. So you've kind of got this path of subnet in the SDDC out through a VPC, and never the twain shall meet. The only challenge we would then have is if they had the same networks on-prem, or they had a red network on-prem and they wanted to follow that route all the way through from on-prem via the SDDC. That becomes impossible and a little bit tricky to kind of manage. But you are...
Fix this issue where we can actually do multiple VPCs and static routes?
It's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if any of you guys have heard anything else on that. I've not come across it as a request before, so I'm honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, I've seen it come up, but I don't know if there's any timetable or if they're going to allow that or how it would actually work.
You have you've got a customer success architect assigned to you, haven't you?
I believe so.
Yeah. It'd be my advice would be to reach out to them, because if worst case scenario, or as an absolute minimum, should I say, they can speak to the individual BUs and then discuss, find out where it is, if it is on the roadmap, where it is, raise it as a priority for you, and then get that ball rolling. So obviously the BU will prioritize things that are requested more often, So if they don't know, they won't necessarily put any weight behind it.
Okay.
A quick question there, is there a specific requirement for the static routes? Because the way I see this being done is we could have individual VPNs to the remote environments and still achieve the connectivity.
we have a transit gateway. I mean, my network team is not on the call maybe, but we have a transit gateway that we want to connect VPCs to the transit gateway. We don't want to be limited by the bandwidth of VPN, which is 1.5 times 4 or 1.25 times 4 is
Yeah,
the
1.2.
max. Yeah, but we have the back end of 25 gig, and we have a direct connecting to that transit gateway. We want to replicate SQL AG data from on-prem to these VMs in SDDC, and limiting bandwidth is going to be an issue for us.
So in your current design though, what we don't support is a direct connect to the transit gateway and then into the SDDC from there. So you'd have a transit gateway direct into your SDDC, which would give you the full bandwidth of the direct connect, right?
Correct, but I think the problem was that we can't create static routes back into the on-prem through the direct connect from the VPC, if I recall, is what our network team said. So we have to utilize the VPN at that point and connect the SDDC via VPN into transit gateway, and then from there use the direct connect.
Okay, yeah, I suppose. And then, either way it'd be a VPN, but a VPN over the direct connect. But yeah, that's just going to complicate things.
So we could still have VPNs and direct connect coexisting, and the direct connect can take its own traffic if we advertise specific routes or the different connections.
But our direct connect comes into the transit gateway, which there's multiple VPCs connected to that transit gateway. And we need to be able to route traffic between all of these different VPCs through that transit gateway, back and forth.
Okay, yeah, that. And I believe you can only have one WIF to the transit gateway.
That's what we are hearing, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So I have a similar question. Basically, I'm on the same team. So our direct connect terminates in another region, and we cannot extend the direct connect directly to the VMware, so it doesn't see it. We created another SDDC in the same region that we had the direct connect termination.
Yep.
We were able to connect it. That was one of the challenges. Apparently, VMC doesn't support the direct connect gateway. That was one of the challenges. The second is, my question is, so what is keeping you from having the ENIs connecting to multiple VPCs? I was watching one of the videos, and then they were saying that it's the maximum number of ENIs that i3 Metal has. Do you have any roadmap on connecting the ENIs to multiple VPCs, or you're trying to go the VMware managed transit gateway?
Yeah, I think the interconnection between the SDDCs and VPCs, the managed transit gateway would be the first option,
and
that's the option that's going to be made immediately available.
And that will be in VMC AWS account or in the
Yes, it will be completely managed by VMware. It will be probably in the shadow account, yes.
Okay, shadow. Do you know what will be the connectivity? Is it like 50 gig or is it?
Yes, I think it should be similar to the regular transit gateway. Yes.
Okay.
Cool. Good questions. So I guess on that front, do you, Prasanna or Zach, do you have any updated ETA when that's due? Is there a rough idea yet, or obviously we won't stand by it until it's released because it is software, but
yeah, at least the managed transit gateway, I think it should be in the upcoming release, tentative.
Cool. And then we're releasing features in stages as well, aren't we? So we're releasing, I think there's 2 or 3 main features initially, and then every revision will get more and more features added to it, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So would Patrick, would that and Ernst, is that something that will work for you, the managed transit gateway, or because you talked about obviously having stuff in one AZ and then in one region, and then a different region, are you looking to migrate stuff from the original SDDC to the new SDDC where the DX is?
No,
Or?
our design is basically to communicate between. So we just put the SQL Server loads on VMC, and everything else goes on the AWS side.
Gotcha.
So the challenge that we have is if we want to have multiple environment like stage pilot, production, all in one SDDC, and on the AWS side they're on different accounts. We don't have a way to basically route the traffic. We have to split the like SDDCs, like
Yeah.
create one SDDC per environment, and that's not what we desire.
Yeah, there's a bit of an overhead with creating multiple SDDCs, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And then yeah. So yeah, we're gonna talk to the product team to get more information on how this managed transit gateway is gonna work, and how it's gonna route, and how the network team will be there to ask questions. Thank you, though.
No worries. It's good. I always like coming across new use cases and stuff. That's I guess one of the advantages with having a couple of different architects on the team and customers like yourself joining in and asking the questions is we get to see stuff that we wouldn't necessarily see within our own accounts necessarily. I've come across something recently that I've seen is a growing thing. There's a bit of a gap in one of the products, and I'm just trying to track that down. And as I was talking about it, there was another customer came on and said, "Oh, I've got the same sort of problem." So I found something that's now 3 or 4 different customers in isolation are requiring as a feature. We haven't released it yet, but at that stage nobody had, shouted out loud and said, "Oh, we're all looking for the same thing." So it's good that they've got a focal point of a couple of people within VMware to that have visibility across the multiple accounts. So rest assured, anytime anything like this comes up, we all take notes, and we do take it back to the BU and log them as features or functionality requests. So it's good that they come up, and it's good that you join actually. So I just request that if you speak to your colleagues and get more people to join in, then we got more stuff to talk about really. So I don't know. So we've got a couple of customer success managers on the line today, and I don't know if you're not familiar with the role of the customer success manager, or you don't have customer success people assigned to you yet, I thought it might be worthwhile if I throw one of them under the bus, so to speak, and ask if any of them feel like unmuting and just giving a bit of a brief description of their role. You may have had interaction with some of the BU or the more technical people, but maybe not necessarily any of the customer success managers. Don't know if any of you feel brave enough to give us a quick 5-minute description of what you do and how you help.
Well, that sounds like a dare, Will.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, I'm not.
Were you waiting for me to come off mute, or is there somebody else I can't see?
To be fair, Andy, I knew you would come off mute, so it's good. I knew you'd shout up. Anybody else that feels, I'm not going to name people because then you will feel compelled to speak. But if nobody else does, Andy, feel free to jump in.
Yep, let's pull the audience because I can't see who the participants are. If somebody else comes off mute, great. If not, I can give you a quick overview.
That'd be brilliant. I think it might be on you. I'm not seeing any mute buttons pressed, mate. So
You got it. Well, hey, thank you for having me, Will.
No worries.
I love dropping into these calls. Cloud Customer Success has really been built to be something special over the years for VMware customers since VMware Cloud on AWS launched. Right now, the CSM has 3 primary focus when engaging with the customer. One of the key areas is around the actual fund and consumption, and as it relates to on-demand or term reservations for the host, and how that impacts the financials and the drawdowns based on the payment type. So naturally, you would look to the CSM for some of the host planning as it relates to the financials and how the payments are set up. The second area that CSMs focus on are the deployment and deployment milestones. Understanding, from the customer who they are, What is their use case? What do they want to accomplish? Who the folks we interact with in a I want to say day to day, but usually it's like weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly interactions, depending on where you're at in your deployment milestone. But also tracking how you're doing with, from the customer perspective, the customer's project milestones. Are they doing what it is that they set out to accomplish in line with the use case? But then we're expanding those conversations to understand what are the specific blockers or scenarios where you're running into issues, and then decisively determining how VMware can help. Is it a product issue? Is it a knowledge issue? Or maybe it's, the customer teams don't have the full experience to implement what's technically required, and maybe you want some type of services or professional services to jump in. But then the third area, and really the third key focus area, is a monthly service review. And if you're not able to get line of sight on how you're deployed and how that's tied to on-demand or term contracts spending, and how that impacts your line of business, which the CSM does keep tabs on and line of sight on. If you're not touching base regularly, like I said, some folks meet weekly, some bi-weekly. The monthly service review really is that touch point for the customer and the CSM to get together and review all the aspects across these areas that can impact a customer's deployment, so we can determine where you're at, if you're successful with what you purchase the services set out to do in line with your use case, or to really determine what issues and how we can help along those deployment, reviewing the different dynamics on the way. I hope everybody's having a monthly service review or some type of review with their CSM. If not, definitely reach out to your CSM and ask for one.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, it's a good point, actually. It sounds brilliant, mate. Thank you for thanks for stepping in. So there's a couple of things I would say along with that as well, is that throughout your journey with sort of VMC, the architects and the customer success managers will probably deal more with you some days or some weeks than others. Like at the very beginning, obviously, the customer success managers are instrumental in helping you to onboard and get the service up and running, and then get your first SDDC deployed. And the architects will help with the design and architectural aspects. And then you may find as you're in run phase, as you're just there, you'll have less contact because you need us less, right? And then the next phase of your project comes around, and we all sit down around the table again and review and make sure that you can do what you want to do and stuff. So it is a bit cyclical. It will kind of ebb and flow how much involvement you'll get from us. But I guess one of our challenges from our side is we can only help ahead of time if you talk to us, really, I guess. And that's one of the best things about from my side of things. So the best things about a customer success manager is that they hold and own those conversations quite often, like those weekly and monthly reviews. And we typically work pretty hand in glove. So they keep me honest and remind me when I've got things to do. But they are a pivotal part of the process, really. So it's a shame none of my I am dropping them under the bus now, Andy. But it's a shame none of my EMEA colleagues felt brave enough to speak up today. But I'll give you a kudos and a shout out anyway, despite being chicken today. But yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Will.
No worries. Thanks, Andy. So I don't know if anybody on chat or on Twitch today has any questions that you want to hear answered. We've got a couple of people watching live on Twitch, and we've obviously got some people on the Zoom call. But if anybody else has anything they want to discuss, please feel free to unmute yourselves and shout out, or even put it in chat if you're not feeling that brave. Otherwise, what I will do is I will go do my usual sort of round table with the architects, find out what we've all been working on, see if there's anything cool come up of late, or something we want to discuss. So I'll give you a couple of seconds, or feel free to just jump in whenever you like. Otherwise, I will start at the top of the list today with Christophe, one of the newer members of our team based out of France. Christophe Lombard, he's recently joined us about, what is it now, a month or 2 months maybe, Chris?
2 months now.
2 months now, yeah. So you're still neck
yes.
deep, I would imagine, in kind of onboarding yourself to
Yeah.
VMware and our processes. Have you been out there yet? Have you met any of the customer base? Have you been working on anything, or are you still kind of getting up to speed?
I'm still getting up to speed. I will probably have my first customer, which is coming probably next week, if everything is going well. In France, we have 2 customers that have been currently onboarded. So yeah, I will be starting the kind of conversations that you have every day with the other customers.
Cool. Well, good luck with those, Christophe. I'm sure we'll
Thank you
speak
very
during
much.
that week anyway. So we'll move on to DeMarcus, who we haven't spoken to you for a couple of weeks actually, Mr. Mac. It's been a while. What have you been up to? What have you been working on?
Yes, it's been a while. So 4 months in, and I'm finally starting to get a lot of stick time with customers. I recently just worked with a customer on transit gateway setup. So, one thing to keep in mind, and it was a learning experience for me, is that when you deploy the transit gateway and you get it configured, the TGW is going to automatically learn routes. The routes are going to, the routes are going to be advertised to it, but that's not true for the VPC's route table, right? So we had a customer that had everything set up properly, but he still wasn't getting communication through, and then we found that the VPC route table didn't have the routes for the SDDC compute segments. So I just remind customers that when you're going through troubleshooting items like that, just make sure you check your route tables, especially when it comes to the TGW, because you might expect that since the TGW has the routes in it, that's going to route to your other VPCs, but those route tables also have to have the routes in it as well, and that's a manual process.
So you could get out from the SDDC through the transit gateway, but you couldn't get back in. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah, and actually, so if you have multiple attaches on the transit gateway as well, each attach has its own set of route tables, and they naturally learn and propagate. But you have to. So in the example I showed earlier on, we actually had to stop propagation and manually enter the routes that we wanted it to learn or know, should I say? So yeah, good point. So anything else interesting for that project, or was it more about just hooking a customer's SDDC into some native services they already had running?
Yeah, it was just about hooking the customer up to the native services that they already had running. So, yep, that's it.
Cool. Thanks, Mr. Mac.
You're welcome.
Prasanna, what have you been looking at of late? I know you've had a couple of interesting things you've been playing around with.
And that's a name I haven't heard in a while. Hi, Prasanna.
Hey, Andy.
Do you know why you haven't heard of him? He's been buried under a massive weight of really deep technical things that he's just about to share with us.
I know, that's usually where I find him, and I haven't gone looking there in a while.
I've built you up now, Prasanna. Sorry.
Sorry to disappoint. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I'll touch upon one of the customer ask. It also came up in Slack whether to use VMC as a possible management or central management location for the robo sites. Let's say a customer has multiple smaller remote sites, maybe with 2 hosts or 3 hosts. Can they potentially use VMC as the central management site?
Interesting.
So that's a potential use
vCenter.
case.
So using that vCenter to manage remote hosts, or just use it as all their management infrastructure, so shared services within VMC.
Yeah. So the VMC vCenter, of course, cannot be used to manage the other hosts because we don't have admin privileges
Yep.
to add any host, but they could potentially host the management appliances within VMC and manage those remote hosts or remote environments. Um, Maybe as a connected question, there was a question whether we can use VMC to host the vSAN witness appliances.
Oh yes, no, I saw that, so that's a good shout. I don't see any problem. I don't know if it's. I've never seen it being unsupported.
Yeah, it's supported. So yeah, we could use VMC as the hosting site for the witness appliances to manage the remote vSAN clusters.
Obviously, you wouldn't use it just for the witness. I mean, it'd be great if you did, but it'd be a bit of overkill. But that's an interesting use case actually. So having like the hub being in VMC and all the like the robo sites managed from there is quite cool. I saw another one as well where we have a customer, similar sort of thing, but they're trying to minimize the number of differences in designs in use across their environments, and they are choosing to go down the VVD, the VMware Validated Design route, for a lot of their on-prem infrastructure. And obviously the VVD and VMC designs are naturally different because they're different things, but there are some areas where they can gain an element of similarity. So they are looking to deploy the first cluster in their SDDC and reserve that as management. So anything that gets deployed to manage the rest of their environment, like in a VVD, they're going to have a management cluster that's purely dedicated to management workloads, and then the following cluster, so they have a remainder of another 5 hosts initially and more hosts going on from there, they are going to keep for just workloads only. And then if they have other shared services, management stuff, they're going to deploy it in the compute area of that first management 3 nodes, if that makes sense. So they gain an element of similarity, but there's obviously obvious differences between the VVD and VMC that there's no way to overcome because they are different things. Obviously, one's the managed service. Actually, I just noticed, Ernst, that you'd posted a question. So apologies if I missed that for a while. So your question is that you say another question is that we had is about the cross-account IAM role. Has any of your other customers complained about the IAM role having too much access and how to limit access? Good question. Anybody want to jump in? No. So when you say cross-account IAM role, you're talking obviously in AWS or in VMC?
Yeah,
and
I'm guessing AWS land.
Yeah, basically the account that VMware uses to connect to the AWS and create the ENIs and everything else. Our security team is very concerned about that IAM role has too much access. You guys can delete the ENIs. You can do a lot of things. So I talked to one of the customers that you guys have. I'm not gonna name. They had a different method. They're routing all the traffic to their on-prem data center, and from on-prem data center they route the traffic to their AWS. We don't want to do that because we don't want to have any presence like a data center presence once we move. We try to use intermediate account, say use another account, another AWS account, and connect it there, and then from there we have control. That didn't work out, so I was just wondering if any of your clients are complaining about, hey, this IAM role has too much access.
To be fair, it hasn't come up with me, and I'm now somewhat surprised because of a number of the accounts I have are highly secure accounts, shall we say? A lot of no SaaS kind of access people. I guess one side of it is that this is a managed service, right? And there are some things that you're gonna have to expect that we're gonna have to have access into just to be able to manage the service for you. It's going to be the same. Imagine if you had a managed service provider traditionally on-prem and they were managing your data centers for you, they would have that access to physically pull a disk or physically, pull a host out of a rack or something. So it's kind of, we're not a full managed service provider in that respect because you are self-managing a lot of it. But for the underlying hardware and software acting as hardware, we have to naturally have access. I don't know if any of the other architects online have seen a similar sort of request. Andy, it sounds like you have.
Yeah, I do. I've seen the request from the other side of the spectrum, being that the AWS account that was used had too much permissions for the individual. Being that we would obviously request somebody from the customer side to join during the service activation and do account linking. And 9 times out of 10, they went and got the master AWS account holder to go log in.
Yeah.
And do the account linking. So, from that perspective, it came down to, hey, we don't want our master payer account being the one, and tied to that individual being tied to the service. They would create additional IAM rules and take like the billing administration over the AWS side out of it, and then create a user account for doing account linking with, I would say, a subset of the AWS permissions, but only allowing what VMC needs access to for managing the service in line with what Will was just describing.
But even after creating the account or linking the account, you still have access to delete any ENI. If it was limited to the ENIs that you created, it was fine. But you guys can change any route, delete any ENIs and stuff like that. So that was a concern that was brought up by our security team.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I've made a note. I'll certainly go and I'll go and find out if there's anything that we could use, like a sub-admin role. On the lines of what Andy was just talking about, one of my secure customers, they have there's another interim, like a managed service provider that they use, and they own all the kind of master admin accounts for AWS, and they provision sub sort of restricted access admin accounts for things like us connecting up during the onboarding process. So maybe there's something we can do around that. But have you had any feedback so far? Is this something you've raised, Ernst, with the BU so far, or?
Yes, we have raised it. I was just wanted to know if other customers are complaining, or is it if it's us only complaining about this issue. Just wanted to see what is the room temperature.
I'll find out. I'll speak to the rest of the guys that aren't on the call. I say guys, I mean guys and girls, obviously. I'll find out in the background, and then I'll ping. I think Z House is your architect aligned to you, so I'll speak to Z and I'll let him know if I've come across any others, or if any of the other guys let me know if they've seen a similar request. Because obviously, if it comes through more and more, then it'll be something that, like I said at the beginning of the call, the BU will, when there's more and more requests for the same sort of thing, they kind of goes further up their. Into their sphere of awareness, shall we say. So leave it with me and I'll
great question, thank you.
I have not seen specific concerns raised as well, but the general request is to actually see the policy that is to be assigned for that role, and the customer generally reviews what are the permissions, and generally my customers seem to be okay with the policy.
Okay, I hope that sort of answers your question. It's that so far it appears to just be you, mate. I'm afraid, but I like I say, I will come back to Z and let you know if I hear from anyone else about it. Cool. Anything else from you, Prasanna, at all? I know Zach has been scrubbling around in the background now, trying to think up things of what he's been doing. So
I'm good for now. Thanks.
You just want to see what Zach comes up with, right? So Zach, hello. What have you been working on? Mate?
Well, I just wanted to mention something I've seen kind of come up a few times, where around the use of like third-party networking appliances and SDDC.
Oh yeah.
The other day it came up in in our Slack and in the support, or I don't remember what channel, but basically support stances is, you can put whatever you want in an SDDC, right? We don't know what it is. We don't know what you're doing. But the issue was that if you put like a router or something, and so what you could potentially do is have a NAT to a router, and then have some like disconnected networks that that connect into the third-party router. So then basically you're using that appliance as your gateway. And it came up that it's not really supported, in the sense that if you have issues with it, VMware support's not going to troubleshoot third-party networking appliances.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think support have always been they've always over-delivered on what they do support, and always done a best efforts for things that are out of their remit, like homegrown scripts and stuff. They will help where they can, but as we don't know really what's running within the SDDC, it then becomes quite difficult to troubleshoot and assist.
And it'd be some other vendors, appliance. We're not going to have the expertise to do that. So the recommendation is, use the distributed firewall for security. Right now we don't have IDS IPS integration. If you need that, the two, I guess, easier, well, I don't know if easy, but most popular is, if you have direct connect, everything's routing back to on-prem, going through your edge there, your edge security, and then, or you can use the transit VPC. The drawback with that is you can only connect to it with VPN, so back to the bandwidth.
Yeah.
Issue there.
So we on the subject of unsupported, I've been discussing a use case today that is never ever, I have to preface this, never ever going to be supported, in the same way that it's never ever going to be supported on-prem as well, and that is nested ESXi in VMC. And there are so many challenges and so many different things that come up for this, and reasons why it will never be supported. But it is an interesting use case, and a puzzle to kind of resolve, because there are even more challenges doing it in VMC due to the lockdown and the storage challenges than there are on-prem. But it is possible. But like I said, it's never going to be supported. It's a very corner use case, shall we say, that's primarily a testing thing. But it's interesting. It's interesting working through the different areas where you think, all right, I've got to it now, and I've resolved that, I've got over that technical challenge, and then you hit the next one and the next one. So it's been interesting, but it's like I said, never going to be supported. Anything else you've been looking at, Zach, as opposed rather than just the appliances? What have you been working with, or is it just sort of normal growth for your customers at the moment?
Yeah, the customers are pretty much just chugging along on their own. Nothing too crazy has come up. Just working on a lot of internal initiatives that wouldn't really be worth mentioning on this call.
Everything's worth. There's no stupid things worth talking about unless they come out of my mouth, Zach. You know this by now. Well, listen. If there's no further questions, I'll do another quick check of the different chat panels. So there's nothing come through yet. I will probably sign off a little bit early, give you 10 minutes of your day back. I want to thank everybody for joining, especially those of you that spoke up, asked questions, gave us some information. It was all good. Thank you very much. I'll post this as usual on YouTube within the next kind of 24 hours. And if this is where you're seeing us on YouTube, then feel free to post any comments or questions there. And I guess that's it. Have a good rest of your day wherever you are in the world, and I'll speak to you again in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thanks, team.
Thanks, Will.
Cheers.
Bye.